Hello, I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Tarot card 9 of Swords, the Lord of Despair and Cruelty. Very real despair and cruelty. Sometimes called the Nightmare card among adepts, this is the card which leaps free from the deck for insomniacs everywhere. The nines reside in Yasad, and because they have a strong foundation, they are executive energies, either for good or ill, but always very powerful. And Mars in Gemini from the 10th to 20th degree is no different. The Nine of Swords, which is Yasad of Vav, shows us 9 blades with their hilts almost interwoven to create a banner backdrop for this individual, face covered, who is clearly in a very real state of misery. A patchwork of roses and astrological signs adorns the draped blanket, which seems to bring no comfort to the person on the bed. Notice the wooden relief carved into the side of that same bed, a scene of action of one individual cutting another down. Malice itself on display, caught in the act, as it were, a moment of pitiless, active suffering. Want, loss, and oppression are all words attributed to the Nine of Swords, where heavy burden, ongoing relentless labors, and slander is suggested. The blades are hung up and away. They can't serve to help the person who's suffering so much. Look to how hard and unforgiving the bed itself is, how despairing the figure in it is. There's a very real sense of grief indulged in, but unshared. Alone in the dark, there seems no one in this room to turn to and to end this pain. You can't see the end of this suffering, of what you're going through, of things in general. Much like you can't see the outer frame ends of the swords. You can't see the end. Notice how the points are hidden by the focused context of the scene. You can also feel here a real sense of repetition, that this is not the first or last time this anguish has taken place, but instead that it repeats. Night after night, these recurring nightmares return. Obsessively worrying, having constant tormenting thoughts, obsessive concerns, and rehashing negative experiences. All of that is advised of in the Nine of Swords. Despair is cruel. It's a cruelty inflicted on ourselves, often brought about by the unhappiness, the cruelty of others. It relies on an internalized sense of hopelessness, fear, stresses, bone-deep unhappiness, mental anguish. This is likely an individual who has been entirely overcome by events or by past treatment, possibly a person who is the subject of a very public scandal, someone who's placing way too much focus on what's already happened and then constantly reliving it, or being forced to hide alone and try to just keep reliving their pain. Functioning from that perspective while also ironically having constant worry and anxiety over the future, neither of which allows them to simply be present in the present. Someone who is having nightmares, wake them up in the middle of the night, or is having waking nightmares in a way, and anxieties that keep them from sleeping in the first place. This is the prisoner of the earlier Eight of Swords, who now released physically is reliving that past suffering. They haven't been fully mentally and spiritually released from that imprisonment, but instead they're being haunted by their past trials and tribulations, while also dreading having any of it ever occur again. So what to do with the Nine of Swords? Stop worrying. Stop worrying so unnecessarily. Release these overwhelming fears you're carrying. Time heals all wounds. Acknowledge that. Acknowledge that no matter how bad everything is or seems to be, eventually, no matter what, it's not going to be this bad. Knowing that will help you to start digging out of the emotional and behavioral hole that you've created. Everything is darkest in the deepest hour of the night before the dawn. But the dawn will come. You will not always be alone. surrounded by black walls. Release your worries and learn to ask for help. Suffering alone can very much prolong a miserable process. It's okay to share what you're going through with others. If you're grieving, find someone that you're comfortable talking to and use that outlet that they're offering to contextualize your own insights in a more healthy way with a broader perspective of shared experience. If you're anxious, afraid, look at those fears and anxieties. Seek to comprehend how you might confront or overcome them. The Nine of Swords reversed. In the Nine of Swords reversed, we find all of despair and cruelty's adjectives flipped to their opposing pole. So rather than dishonesty and betrayal, you have words and feelings like faithfulness, obedience. Rather than malice and suffering, there's patience and generosity. The broad kind of generosity, a genuine unselfishness of self and all existent things. This is the reversal of fears, of anxiety, of cruelty. It's the release of emotional and behavioral burdens, letting go of all those dark thoughts that we may have been constantly re-dialoguing actively in our minds, all that negative self-hate. Allowing it to evaporate, letting go of the storm clouds in the mind so that only the bright, clear, warm, comfortable day shines there again. When we allow ourselves to hope, the light at the end of the tunnel of all that anguish appears. It's a break in the storm's darkness where no matter how bad things seem, we allow ourselves to know that we can and will recover. That simply by allowing ourselves to let go, even for one moment, one instant, of the anguish we willfully carry and inflict on ourselves, that by doing that, just for one tiny little second, we automatically allow it to dissolve away. We allow the break in the clouds to open up. Rather than isolating ourselves in our negativity, we can choose to reach out as well, to ask for help where we need it. And we can be all right with things not always being okay or going our way. So rather than rehashing old pain constantly, this reversal shows being okay with the fact that pain does happen. Sometimes things are horrible, but focusing on that negativity doesn't make it lessen. Understanding that suffering is part of the process is what lets us evolve beyond it. And here there is also the behavior of not being so hard on ourselves or so hard on oneself. Finding more internal and external equanimity of emotion and mental communication. Forgiving oneself for past mistakes, past anguishes, allowing them to fall free, allowing those swords to fall away from gravity, freeing yourself of them in a healthy and useful way. So what to do if you pull the Nine of Swords reversed? You're already going through the process of releasing your fears and negative self-talk. That's what this card is advising us of. You're doing a great job. You're doing well at that. Keep it up. Keep creating and using positive plans to counteract negative anxieties. If you're panicking, take a breath because it's all in your head. This despair isn't real despair. It's despair reversed. So you're likely anticipating the worst, but you don't have to act like it already has happened, especially when it likely won't. Take care of yourself, be aware of incoming stress, and actively find and implement ways to make yourself feel more comfortable. Things really aren't as bad as you're making them out to be, and you know it. Until next time.